Hi there, I'm Sam, and just yesterday I got the biggest work promotion of my life. Despite this huge success, it had actually been quite the rough journey, especially since growing up. I never had that many supportive figures there to help me. But here's my story from the start, and how I managed to push through, get rid of my toxic family, and become successful. I was adopted at a young age by a woman named Leslie and a man named Robert. They'd already had a son who was about the same age as me, and his name was Marcos. I can't remember too much of my childhood because as a kid, there's not really much you'd notice. There was only one thing that I found a little strange. Marcos received new gifts every year for his birthday, but I would get really shabby and tiny gifts. Often I'd get just a slice of cake and nothing else though. But this is the least of the problems I would soon have. Marcos and I started school together when we were 6. Things just took an even worse tumble from there. For whatever reason, I just wasn't as smart as my brother. I wasn't even that bad of a student, but I wasn't as good as Marcos. Mom and Dad made sure to emphasize this. They would go out and get lots of delicious foods for my brother to celebrate his success, while I was sent to my room to be out of their sight. They would also only take Marcos on vacations, but later edit me in for their social media. This occurred for literally my entire life up to now.
Why can't you be more like your brother? I should have adopted an infant baby. The older ones will never be successful.
You're right, Leslie. We can just send the failure off with some money after he's 18. He'll manage, however.
As a 6-year-old, I really didn't understand what Mom meant by this, but I'm assuming that she was upset by my grades. On the rare occasions that I got a score higher than Marcos, my mom would completely neglect me and begin sulking. I heard my mom telling Marcos that he has to absolutely destroy me in school. I felt a little threatened, to be honest, but it was whatever. As school got harder and harder, my life at home also progressively got worse. I watched as Marcos signed up for countless sports and activities, as well as tutors, but I got nothing. By the time I was 10, I didn't get a single celebration or gift for my birthday either, while Marcos over here was celebrating something new every week and getting all the love from my parents. Well, he wasn't getting love all the time. Often throughout the years, Mom and Dad would hold family reunions, and I was almost always taken along. When I was first adopted, Leslie had announced it to everyone about what she'd done, so I think it would be a little strange if you had a kid that you never brought out. During the reunions, Mom would begin speaking about me very highly in front of the relatives, and I could still remember just how impressed they were by my achievements. Obviously, she also boasted about Marcos, but these rare occasions were a chance for Leslie to show off how good of a person she was to adopt a kid.
Where's my baby Sam? There he is! I just knew our family was missing something, and after Sam, he brought smiles to our faces and helped make our family more beautiful than ever. Did you know that Sam won the Perfect Attendance Award for almost every year?
Yes, I just love my boy. We play football in the backyard every week just to help exercise ourselves and have some father-son bonding. Isn't that right?
Oh, and of course, I can't forget the apple of my eye, Marcos. Marcos here is a straight-A student and on the baseball team. And he plays the flute as well, isn't he just my beautiful little musician?
I knew damn well that my parents were lying, but I didn't have the heart to speak up. After all, the relatives weren't really my relatives. Would they believe their biological cousin, or some random kid they adopted? By the time we were almost about to graduate middle school, Marcos was one of the most academically powered students and a great baseball player. I was struggling to get an A, but I still managed. I became quite depressed due to my parents, so I smoked for a little while but quit eventually. After this, I was able to keep my school scores at least a little bit afloat. My classes were hard, and I wanted to give up. But while I was in physical education, I discovered something about myself. I was really good at basketball. Even the PE coach offered to teach me more skills for free. I mean, now that I look back on it, I had the heights for it. And I always used to shoot hoops into my brother's basketball hoop when Leslie and Robert had taken Marcos out for their weekly treat. Among everyone that I'd met in my life so far, the only people that had ever taken a liking to me was the basketball coach and a guy in my algebra class, whose name was Jacob. Jacob wasn't the most popular, but he wasn't a loner either. He had actually quite the amount of friends, but for some reason, he decided to talk to me one day, and we've actually come to know each other pretty well. He also happened to get on the high school basketball team the next year. Jacob soon learned about my issues, and we had a long and thoughtful conversation about how I can manage to help myself while still living in this terrible situation. I agreed, and from then on, I knew that I had to take things into my own hands and not let anyone in my family bring me down. I didn't have a phone to contact Jacob, but I could email him through my brother's old computer. Since he was so spoiled, he'd never remember that one of his laptops was missing. For the next couple of weeks, I used my study hall time to learn basketball from Coach and Jacob, and I also conversated with Jacob back and forth. As high school started, Coach helped me enroll into the basketball team despite the deadline already being reached. While that was going on, I started noticing that Marcos was becoming more and more laid back. I had a few ideas in mind as to why he was becoming like this. Marcos was actually a certified genius with a high IQ, so maybe he thought that he didn't really need to work too hard to effortlessly get good scores in school. He'd also gotten a girlfriend and an yearly internship, so he probably thought his life was all set. This kind of mindset was very dangerous, but it was his life, not mine. I didn't dare to tell my parents about what I'd been doing because I was scared of them thinking that I was trying to take over Marcos's throne at home. So I just kept to myself by playing basketball with Jacob and making sure my schoolwork was all done. At this point, Marcos had really become somewhat of a failure. But for some reason, Leslie and Robert hadn't noticed at all. It wasn't like Marcos was failing classes miserably, but it was evident that he would do the bare minimum for classes. Anyhow, the years passed and I was doing really well in school. I learned how to study efficiently so that I could get the highest grades possible, and it did work. I also managed to sneak out of my family's house every night to hang out with Jacob, who also gave me a phone for my birthday. I'm so grateful for him. The sneaking out part might not be a very good student-like trait, but I still did it nevertheless. I was becoming one of Jacob's closest friends, and we had so much fun just having talks throughout the late nights. So, are you ready for graduation? What are you gonna do in college? You know, I'm honestly a little scared to graduate, but at least I'll get to get away from Leslie and Robert. As for college, I'm going for computer science. You? Same, but I'm going for bioengineering. I'm pretty decent at biology, so I'll shoot for that. Our school's basketball team did very well every year, and I was even promoted to be the leader with Jacob during our senior year. We won championship after championship, and everything felt like a fever dream. Although my home life was still incredibly dull, I tried as hard as I could to get past. I graduated high school with a 5.0 GPA, and through basketball, I was able to get a full scholarship to my dream university. Jacob also got a scholarship to his university, which happened to be only an hour away from mine. As I was packing to leave, though, I was stopped by my family. I'd just gotten notice from Jacob that he was about to pick me up for the airport, and now this has to happen. Of course.
Where do you think you're going?
Mom, I got accepted to college, so I'm going to go and get my degree.
You can't do that. You must have cheated on your exams. How did Marcos end up to be even worse than you?
Don't ask me, Mom. Ask Marcos. While you decided to neglect me for all these years of my life, I've been using my time wisely and learning how to take care of myself. Goodbye, Mom and Dad. I loved you, but I'm sure you didn't love me.
Whatever. We never wanted you here in the first place. You're probably going to just sleep around with girls the whole time and end up failing. We don't need the loser that you are.
Goodness. I felt kicked for the first time in a while, but this was the last time I planned on ever seeing them again. That was a good thing. As I stormed out of the house with my belongings, Jacob had just pulled up to the driveway. I got in and explained the whole situation. Jacob calmed me down after a bit, and we caught our plane to the city that our universities were at. From then on, the two of us rented a home together, and life became absolute heaven. I wasn't living with the narcissistic weight of my parents on my back. Eventually, 4 long years of schooling had passed, and I finally earned my degrees, finding a good job fairly quickly. Jacob did too, and we were both so extremely successful. We both decided not to find partners yet, but instead kept each other company until our jobs were fully stable. This was fine by both of us, and as time went on, I was almost healed from the neglect I had faced so long ago. One day, I found a post that was made by Leslie. It was a whole sob story on how her son had become addicted to drugs and alcohol. Since his failure to get accepted into any schools, he had even sold the parents' car, and one day, after so much alcohol, he burned down part of their house. He was enrolled into community college, but even then, became too tired to go. I felt a bit sad, but I think that Leslie and Roberts let their son have too much for only a little bit of work. I privately messaged the account and sent a photo of me and my promotion. There was an immediate response from my mom begging to send over money to help her family. I read the message and tried not to smile. Sorry, Mom, but you never helped me. So why would I do that now? Thanks for listening. Please comment and share your thoughts.
Hello there. My name is Amanda, and I haven't had a very easy life. Growing up, my mother would constantly be verbally abusive to me, calling me worthless and pathetic. When she would drink, she would even hit me with whatever was close at hand. Sometimes she used a golf club, and one time she even used a frying pan. At the time, I didn't know why she was so mean to me, and I just assumed that it had been something that I had done. I was constantly walking on eggshells trying to avoid her so that I didn't upset her and get hurt. To make matters worse, my father always just ignored it when it happened, pretending not to see what my mother was doing to me. The physical abuse ended, though, once I was old enough and stronger and taller than my mother. But the emotional abuse didn't stop. It was always so frustrating, because around the rest of our family or our neighbors, my mother would behave like a saint. In fact, many people would compliment me on how amazing of a person she was, but I knew that it was all an act. Thankfully, my father worked for a large company and made very good money, and when I was old enough, we were able to afford for me to go away for school. They were some of the best years of my life since my school was on the other side of the country. I rarely ever spoke to either of my parents, which made avoiding my mother's abuse very easy. And it was there at school that I met Joseph. We were in many of the same classes and we hit it off right away. We liked the same movies and bands and even the same foods. After college, we kept in touch, and not long after we started dating and eventually got married. I tried to tell my husband about how terrible my parents had been to me growing up, and he tried to understand, but he had grown up in a happy house where his parents loved him, which made it hard for him to understand what I had gone through. But he did agree that we should keep our distance from them. He wanted me to be happy, and while he didn't understand why I was so angry at my parents, he did understand that it was for the best for my mental health to cut ties with them. After a few years, though, my mother began to reach out to me. It turned out that my father had left her for a much younger woman, someone almost as young as me, and even though he had left her the house as well as a large sum of money, that she was feeling lonely and rejected. Apparently, he moved to a faraway country, never to be heard from again. Over the phone, she tried to guilt-trip me into feeling sympathy for her, but I just couldn't. She had made my childhood a living hell, and now she was trying to butt back into my life now that I finally had found happiness. At first, I was able to shoot her down, but eventually she got in touch with Joseph and she managed to fool him into thinking that she had changed and that she was a good person. I didn't trust her, but I agreed to let her begin coming over for visits. At first, she did appear to be a different person, and even apologized for what she had done to me as a child. According to her, my father had never been faithful, and while it wasn't right of her to do, she took out her frustrations on me every time my father would cheat on her. It didn't make it right, of course, but I finally did understand why she had done what she did. Slowly, she began to visit more often, and even after she apologized, I found it hard to trust her. Until one day I came home early from work and then understood what my intuition was trying to tell me. There, laying in my bed with my husband, was my mother. I couldn't believe my eyes. They were in our bed having sex. Shocked, I panicked and ran out of the room and went for a drive. After a few hours, I cleared my head and then went home, but when I got there, the two of them were gone. The next day, I called my mother to scream at her, and my husband answered the phone and told me that he had fallen in love with her and that it would be best for me to not call there again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, He sounded like he had gone mad. I knew my mother was great at manipulation, but this was insane. And then I got the idea to go and speak with his parents. If I couldn't talk sense into him, maybe they could. And so I drove over to their house and told them about what had happened. They didn't believe me at first, but then I convinced them to go with me to my mother's house to prove it to them. Once there, I led them into my mother's house, and as soon as my mother saw us, she became violent and a fight broke out. My own mother hit me several times and bruised me quite badly and even bloodied up Joseph's father's nose. After a few minutes, though, I was able to calm everyone down enough for the fighting to end, and Joseph spoke up.
I'm sorry, Amanda, but I don't love you anymore. I love your mother, and I want a divorce so that I can marry her.
Neither his parents or I could believe what he was saying. But if this is what he wanted, then I would be forced to give it to him. And so we left. The months that followed were quite hazy for me. I was feeling depressed and had a hard time functioning, but I did make it through. I got a lawyer and filed for divorce. Since I had done nothing wrong, I was able to sue both of them for alimony and got $45,000 from each of them. The money wouldn't make me happy, but it did help me to get back on my feet. I moved away and found myself a new house to live in, along with a new job as well. It was the best thing for me. I made new friends and found that my new job was very challenging, but also a better fit for me. It paid better than my old job, and even had better hours as well. Just as everything began to fall into place, though, for me. My ex-husband called me. How he got my new number, I don't know, but he began to complain about my mother. Apparently, not long after I left town. My mother became sick, and the strange illness slowly made her more and more ill. They eventually were able to put her on medication to help her get better. But by that time, the illness had left her stuck in a wheelchair and unable to take care of herself. Exhausted and desperate for help, my ex-husband called me up and was trying to get me to lend a hand.
Please, she is your mother. You need to come and give a hand helping her. I can't do it on my own.
You should have thought of that before you cheated on me with her. As far as I'm concerned, the two of you are dead to me.
You don't understand. She can't even use the bathroom by herself, and she is so incredibly mean and constantly calls me nasty names.
Oh, that's where you are wrong. I do understand. She did the exact same thing to me growing up. Joseph, you made this choice, and now you have to deal with the consequences of that choice. And with that, I hung up and blocked his number. A small part of me empathized with him, but it was true that he had made a choice to cheat on me with her, and then he chose to marry her. Everything after that was all his problem. Just because he now regretted it didn't make the pain that he had caused me to go away. After that, I didn't hear from them again, but I did hear from mutual friends of ours how he was doing. By the sounds of it, he and my mother had blown through all of my mother's money that she had gotten from my father and were now living very poorly. Whenever my friends saw my ex-husband, he was always wearing torn and dirty clothes, and it was obvious that they were struggling financially. After all, his parents had disowned him after what he had done to me, and he didn't have the money to put my mother in a home which would free him from the responsibility of caring for her. It's very unfortunate, but that's what happens when you're a terrible human being. Thanks for watching. Hi there. My name is Claire, and I know that I look well put together, but I wasn't always this way. In fact, growing up, my family was very poor. My mother and father did their best, and there was always food on the table, but we never bought anything that wasn't from a secondhand store. It was just the four of us. My mother and father, and then there was myself and my sister Mary. We did have extended family, but we never met them. When I was old enough, my mother told me that the reason that this was the case was due to the fact that she was black and that my father was white. I didn't really understand it, but since we didn't see them, it really wasn't a problem. After all, our parents were different, and my sister and I were different as well. She looked like our father and had very pale skin, while mine was more like our mother's and very dark. So for us, it always just seemed normal. That is, until that fateful night. My parents had gone to a party at a friend's house, and on their way home, they got into a car accident. They were rushed to a hospital, but unfortunately passed away soon after. At the time, my sister was 13 and I was 11. My sister and I were terrified. We didn't know what would become of us. Since we didn't have any family present to claim us, we were sent to a foster home. I still remember crying my eyes out and not understanding what was going on. We were there for a week when we were told that they had good news for us and that they had tracked down our grandparents. Both my sister and I were shocked to hear this. We weren't sure how to feel, really. Part of us were excited to meet them, but we were worried as they were complete strangers. When they arrived, we saw that they looked exactly like our father. Their faces were so warm and inviting. They greeted Mary affectionately and kissed her on her head dozens of times. However, when their eyes fell on me, their smiles faded, and they didn't even come over and hug me, even though I wanted them to more than anything. After a few hours, they left, and my sister and I were wondering what to make of the visit. But the next day, our grandparents sent a car. We assumed that it was there to collect both of us, but the looks on the faces of our foster parents said otherwise. Neither of them were very happy.
Girls, your grandparents sent a car to pick you up. But we have some bad news.
Bad news? We don't understand.
Well, the car is only here to pick up Mary. I'm very sorry, Claire, but they only filled out paperwork to adopt Mary.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. As if losing our parents wasn't bad enough, now my sister and I were going to be separated as well? That night, I cried myself to sleep. I had never been alone before, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was devastated, and I couldn't help but feel that I was worthless and garbage. The years that followed were hard. I was bounced around from foster home to foster home. Some were better than others, but none ever felt truly like home. Nothing ever felt as happy and secure as how I felt with my parents and sister growing up. I did keep in contact with my sister through email, though. The messages that we sent to one another were a beacon of hope in a very dark time in my life. She told me stories about how our grandparents were spoiling her, giving her everything that she could ever want. She had more clothes than she could ever wear. She always had the best computer and went to a private school and ate all the best foods. I couldn't help but feel jealous. My grandparents were exceptionally wealthy and spent their money freely on my sister. While I lived in poverty since my foster parents never really cared for me that much, more than once I tried to send letters or emails to my grandparents begging them to adopt me as well. I tried my best to make them understand that I would be happier living with them and that I would be a picture-perfect addition to their family, that it was so unfair that they had separated my sister and I, but they never responded. My sister tried to beg them to adopt me as well, but they would get angry to the point where they were almost violent when she did, and so she stopped mentioning it. I knew that it weighed on her, but I also knew that it wasn't her fault. After I graduated from high school, I tried once more to reach out to them. I wasn't sure if I could get any scholarships, and I was desperate to still be able to go to college. They had more than enough money to help me pay for school, but I also knew that it was a long shot. The day after I sent the email, they finally responded to me.
Hello, Claire. Congratulations on being accepted to college. We understand that you are indeed our grandchild. However, that alone does not mean that we are obligated to help you. You are a reminder of our son's poor decision to marry someone inferior to our standing. Please don't ever write to us again. To us, you are nothing but a bad memory.
Her words hurt badly, and I spent many nights crying, thinking that I would never be good enough for them. Thankfully, though, I did receive a letter saying that I had been awarded a full scholarship from a prestigious law firm. With my school completely paid for, I focused hard on my studies and years later graduated at the top of my class. I was even offered an entry-level position at the very law firm that had given me the scholarship. It turned out that the lead partners had all come from similar circumstances as myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt a part of a family, a part of a group of people that not only understood the pain that I had gone through, but also accepted me despite of it. As the years drew on, I rose up in the firm and even met my husband there. The two of us eventually became partners in the firm, and we now live in a mansion with 3 beautiful children of our own. My sister, however, chose a different path, and while I am proud of the woman that she has become, she chose to follow her passions, and she became a teacher. I know that it makes her very happy, and I even assisted her in finding a home that she could afford since I make quite a bit more than her. Things were finally going well for me, but then I got an email from my grandparents. Apparently, they had made some poor investments, and they were going to be forced to sell their home to pay for their debts. They had squandered their fortune and were desperate.
Hello, Claire. We are very sorry for how we have treated you in the past. We have come to see that we blamed you for something that wasn't even your fault. Please, could you find it in your heart to forgive us for our poor choices? We would love to get to know you and your husband and our great-grandchildren as well. Please forgive us.
I instantly knew why they had written the letter. They had no other options and had only reached out to me because they were screwed otherwise. My sister couldn't afford to have them stay with her. After all, although her home was quite lovely, there was no room for them, and my sister didn't make enough money to help them get a new home of their own. On top of that, the closer that my sister and I became, the more distant she became with our grandparents. Neither of us could forgive them for separating us all those years ago. And so, just as they had done to me, I wrote them back. Hello, I am very sorry to hear of your plight, and that you are having such a hard time right now. However, I cannot help but feel that it is all well-deserved. I can't tell you how many nights I fell asleep crying because you left me alone in foster care, while you gave my sister everything in the world. And all because of the color of my skin. So no, I won't be helping you, and I would greatly appreciate that you never write to me again. They of course ignored the last part, and kept sending emails begging me to reconsider, but I had no interest in entertaining them. Later I found out that they had been forced to move into a retirement home, and that the only one that they could afford was terrible. The staff were mean to the residents, and they were fed the blandest and poorest foods. My sister would visit them on the holidays, but only for very brief visits, and they constantly pleaded with her to speak to me and get me to take them in, but I only ever laughed these requests away. After all, they had abandoned me, and I had been forced to do everything the hard way. I had worked hard to get an education, and then a fantastic job. Then I found someone that truly loved me for who I am, and we have made a wonderful family. We both know what it's like to not have anything, and so we make a point to tell our children every day that they are loved and treasured. As far as I'm concerned, my grandparents are exactly where they deserve to be. Thanks for watching.
Hi everyone, I'm Patrick, though my wife insists on calling me Pat, as though I were a woman in her late 60s. She thinks she's so funny. She actually is quite funny most of the time. She's been my wife for a few years now, and she's not changed one, but our lives have in a way that neither of us predicted. Let me start this story with a little history. I'm 35 years old, and when I was 15, my parents left me in a house on my own. At first, I thought they'd just gone on holiday without remembering to tell me. They were not in their right mind because of their substance abuse problems. I didn't think anything of it. I still went to school, and I still hung out with my friends at the skate park. The only thing that changed is that I was free to eat when and what I wanted, and I was allowed to stay out as late as I felt. No one was there to stop me. Then, after a whole month passed, and I couldn't live off of the food they'd left in the house for much longer, I realized something. They weren't coming back. I was 15, and suddenly, all on my own. At first, I thought about calling the police, but then, just as I was going to do exactly that, I noticed a letter in the post box with my mother's handwriting. Dear Patrick, we can't raise you anymore. I'm so sorry. Don't look for us. We don't want you. I was so sad that my own parents would just abandon me like that and disappear, but I had to move on. I had to protect myself. A few months later, I had to start stealing in order to eat. I didn't want to go into foster care. I've seen enough movies and read the news, so I know what happens to kids in the system. I wouldn't let myself be subjected to that. Well, one night, while I was prowling around the backs of stores near my house for food they'd thrown out, Kayla appears in the doorway, looking at me strangely. She'd asked me what I was doing, and I told her I was just hanging around.
I've got food if you need it.
I don't need food.
Then I guess I'll have to throw it all away.
Wait, don't do that. It started out slow. I was embarrassed about needing help from Kayla. She was my crush, and I had seen her around school afterwards. She never called me out, or even outwardly acknowledged me. But sometimes, she'd nod in my direction. It got better over time, and I started to go around every other day. Then, one day, she invited me inside, and things just got better from there. Her parents became my surrogate parents, and eventually, I and Kayla got married, and I moved out of the house my parents abandoned me in, and the rest is history, which brings me to the present. One day I was watching TV with Kayla, my wife, and suddenly the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I was shocked to see my mom and dad. I stared wordlessly until my dad said, "Son, we're back."
We're so happy to see you again.
Mom? Dad? It's been 20 years. What are you doing back? I thought I'd never see you again. You said that you didn't want to see me again.
We didn't have anything to offer you, son. We had no money. We knew you'd be better on your own than with us.
They weren't wrong, but you didn't, did you? You always were smart. Are you just going to make us stand out here in the cold? Come on, invite us in. Listen, son, I did find a way, but can I still resent them for what they did? Am I not entitled to be angry after how they abandoned me? So, I let them inside, and they sat down opposite Kayla and myself, looking so sad and pitiful that I found myself feeling bad for them. We're sorry. We never should have left. We wanted to give you a better shot at life, and we thought the way to do that was to leave you alone. We're so sorry.
And we're so proud of you, too. You've come such a long way. CEO of a big food company, entrepreneur, and the head of the biggest homelessness charity in the world. Let's celebrate to our son.
Kayla hadn't made anything to eat yet, so we ended up ordering in food, and by the time we'd finished eating, it was too late. I don't know how it happened, but that one meal led to them moving in. They took the guest room above the garage and then made breakfast the next morning. Kayla wanted to kick them out, but I reminded her that I was a man who believed in second chances. I let them move in, and I let them take an interest in my life. Slowly, over a few months, I started to trust them again, and we got to know each other once more. I was so happy to have my parents back that I was willing to overlook the strange things. The missing notes from my wallet, the strange obsession they had with my signature, and the whispered conversations they had when they thought I wasn't watching. They did parent things. They made me pancakes and drove me to work whenever Kayla needed the car. They took me to the movies and joked over burgers. Then, few months later of my parents moving in, I returned home to find Kayla on the front porch with 3 suitcases and tears pouring down her face. Kayla, what's wrong?
We've been kicked out of the house.
What? Why?
They say the house was sold. The papers were all submitted. Legally, this isn't our house anymore. What are we supposed to do?
Kayla was beside herself, but I quickly made some phone calls and got us set up in a temporary house. We moved all of our things over and let the house be taken away. Kayla was right. It was all legal. Someone had copied my signature and sold the house from under us. I knew it was my parents. Not just because they didn't appear for the next week, but because by the end of the week, I received a letter. Patrick, it read. Sorry, we needed the money. You can buy another house. It's best if you don't contact us. We're not worth your time. Kayla and I were furious, but we kept our heads on. I called a lawyer, the police, and a private investigator. I filed a report with the police, had a lawyer draw up the paperwork to get Kayla involved in all of my assets, and to make sure my parents are never put into my will. Any changes to any of the assets would require both of them to be there in person in the future. I could never be hurt like that again. The private investigator found my parents in the state over when they were trying to gamble some of the money from the house. Before the police were notified, I drove over. We found them in a hotel. You let me trust you again. You spent months being my parents, and then you did this to me. Why?
I don't know what you thought was going to happen. We never wanted a son, but we got a parental check for you. When you turned 15, we figured you were old enough not to rat us out to the state.
I ate out of trash cans because of you. Which was great for us because we kept getting checks for you, and we didn't have to spend any of it on you.
You were always so needy. It really annoyed us. We were free when we finally left you.
Why did you come back at all?
Ha ha ha. Are you stupid, Patrick? I thought you were supposed to be the smart one. We came back because you made money. Money we needed.
Yeah, it was okay for a while. We took cash from your wallet to pay for your trips to the cinema and whatever meals we paid for. You kept a roof over our head while we planned, and we made our move.
I thought you would at least be remorseful, but you're almost bragging.
We came back after 20 years, and your first instinct was to trust us. I'm actually disappointed in you.
My work requires me to hold an everyone gets a second chance policy. I work with people who made a mistake and are left to suffer the consequences. I want to be able to give people better chances, but you didn't deserve your first chance, let alone your last. We don't even care what you think. We've got the money, and we're going to live out our dreams like we always wanted. And if anything, we've done you a favor. Are you serious? Sure, we taught you that trusting someone, even if just to give them a second chance, is wrong. You should only look out for yourself, so you're welcome. They said it so seriously that I didn't feel an ounce of guilt when the police stormed the hotel room and arrested them both.
No, please, son. Please don't press charges. Don't you owe us? Don't you think we deserve some kind of compensation?
We gave up 15 years of our lives. You're not supposed to view it as being made to give up your life. You're supposed to want children and be invested in them, not hateful. My parents were forced to give us the money that they had left over, leaving them bankrupt. They couldn't afford to pay the rest, so they went to prison. The court ordered them to work regularly in order to earn money to pay us back. Kayla and I bought a new house, and we settled back into regular life, putting that episode behind us, just like I had to the first time they abandoned me. We found out less than 6 months later that we were going to be parents, and we were so excited. But I was sad that my child wouldn't get to meet my parents proper. When she was born, I took her to the prison to visit my parents, but the security guard told me that they were worse in prison, and their jail time was going to be increased as a result of their crimes. I wish my parents had the capacity to improve, but I feared that wasn't in their nature. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.
Hello there. My name is Moya, and I grew up in a small town with my parents and my brother Vincent. I had always known that we had extended family, but I had never met them. Honestly, it never occurred to me to ask my parents about the rest of our family, as it never made much of a difference to me. I just played and went to school and focused on growing up. It wasn't until I graduated from high school that I began to wonder about who we might be related to. In school, I was always fascinated with history, and I suddenly became very curious about my family's own. Hey, Mom and Dad, what happened? Why don't we ever speak or visit with our extended family?
Well, it's a bit complicated, but your aunt and my parents never really got along. There was a lot of bad blood between them, and I chose to side with your aunt. After that, we lost contact with them.
But what happened? Why haven't we tried to reconnect with them?
Well, we have tried a few times over the years, but not since your aunt passed away. It's just complicated.
No matter how I asked, they wouldn't give me more information, and so I just ended up accepting the fact that I would never know. After university, I started working as a teacher. It didn't pay a lot, but I was doing what made me happy. My brother Vincent, though, had started school to become a lawyer, although I knew that he was struggling. He spent more time partying and socializing than actually studying. But it was his choice to make, and so I didn't say anything. I just tried my best to support him. It was after my brother's first year had ended that both of my parents had a terrible accident. Their home was not equipped with a carbon monoxide detector, and when I went over to visit them, I found the two of them unconscious in their living room. They had fallen asleep while watching TV and had become poisoned by carbon monoxide. I opened up all of the windows and doors and called for an ambulance, but by the time that they made it to the hospital, it was too late. They passed away and left me and my brother alone. Planning for the funeral was incredibly difficult, but the two of us managed. At the funeral, though, we were given the biggest surprise possible. Among the people that attended the funeral were dozens of our parents' friends and our grandparents as well. It was the very first time that we had ever met them.
Hello there. This is a bit awkward, but we're your grandparents.
Hi there. It's nice to meet you, but if you don't mind me asking, why haven't we met before?
Well, it's a long story, but it's all in the past, and if you would like, we would love to get to know you too.
Neither of us knew what else to do other just say that we would be happy to try. The weeks that followed, though, were rough. We tried our best to adjust to a life without our parents. The whole time our grandparents kept coming over. The meals that my grandmother cooked for us were delicious, but no matter how much I spoke to either my grandmother and grandfather, I still felt awkward around them. It was almost as if they weren't really that interested in getting to know me, but they acted completely different with my brother. If I didn't know better, they were only interested in getting to know him and couldn't care less about me. Hey, Vincent, do you think there is anything odd about our grandparents?
Nope, they're really nice to me. It feels like Mom and Dad are still alive when I talk to them.
Well, that's good, but I don't feel the same way. They just feel like strangers to me.
Maybe you should try harder then, because they've already told me that they love me.
They have? Well, they haven't said anything of the sort to me. I didn't doubt that he was telling me the truth, but I was confused why he was being treated so differently. Another week passed, and our parents' lawyer contacted my brother and I to let us know that he was ready to read to us our parents' will. And so, we went and paid him a visit.
I am very sorry for your loss. This can't be easy for either of you. Yeah, it would have been even more difficult if our grandparents hadn't shown up. Your grandparents? Really?
Yes, they introduced themselves at the funeral.
That is definitely unusual. But at any rate, I want you to know that a lot of thought and concern went into the creation of this document. It wasn't easy for your parents to come up with this will. It might not seem like it, but I want you to know that they made it as fair as possible.
Both of us were a bit confused by this, but once he started to describe how things were divided up, we began to understand, but then had more questions. Our parents left me the house and over $500,000 while my brother was only given $25,000. I could tell by the look on his face that he was less than happy by this turn of events, but he said nothing. When we got home, my brother ran and told our grandparents about what had happened, and the three of them came running to confront me.
How dare you steal from my grandson?
Steal? I didn't steal anything. I don't know why our parents left me so much more.
Just give our grandson what he is owed. You have no right to that money.
He deserves that money, unlike you.
But my parents wanted me to have it.
They weren't your parents, you imposter.
And with that, they pushed me out of the house and locked the door behind me. Angry, I called up the lawyer and asked him if they had the right to do what they had just done.
I was afraid that that might happen, so I wasn't supposed to tell you this yet. But I think it will help things make more sense. You may need to sit down for this. You are adopted. Your mother was your adoptive mother's sister, so your brother is actually your cousin. Suffice to say that your grandparents hated your real mother more than anything and disowned her. Your adoptive mother chose to side with her sister and then disowned her parents in turn. It was a massive mess. However, when your real mother passed away, she left you the house you live in, as well as large sum of money that your parents were to hold on to until you were older. So that is why you got so much more than Vincent. The long and short of it is that no, they don't have the right to deny you access to your home.
I was speechless. I didn't really know if I should include the police, but I saw no other choice. And so I called them and then made my way over to my house. Both my grandparents and Vincent rushed outside.
We thought we told you to get away and never come back.
My grandfather swung at me and punched me so hard that I was sent flying to the ground. Why are you being like this? I found out who my mom was and that you hated her, but why do you hate me?
Your mother was no longer our daughter, and you are just the evil offspring from that idiot.
What about you, Vincent? Do you hate me now, too?
Yes, you weren't even their child, and yet they gave you more than me. Their actual child? It's not fair. Grandma and Grandpa told me all about the evil witch who was your real mother, and how we're all better off that she's dead. Why Mom and Dad would side with her, I have no idea.
The look on his face frightened me as he began to attack me. Just then the police showed up, though, and pulled him off me. Terrified, I told the police that I wanted to place charges against all of them. Without question, the police dragged the three of them away as I went into my house, only to discover that they had destroyed a lot of things in my house. They had destroyed literally everything in the house that wasn't my brother's. I was enraged, and I called up the lawyer and had him file a lawsuit against my grandparents and brother. There was no way that I could recover the items that they had sold, but I was definitely going to make them pay for destroying my belongings, especially since many of them had belonged to my parents and were connections to them. Thankfully, my case was seen by a judge that sided with me. He sentenced my grandfather and brother to jail for 10 years, each for assaulting me and for destroying my belongings, but my grandmother got off with just receiving a restraining order. On top of that, I did manage to sue my brother for destroying portions of my inheritance, and the judge awarded me his share of the inheritance as compensation. I felt very guilty for doing that, but after he had so easily betrayed me and attacked me, I just couldn't let what he had done to me go without some kind of repercussions. Losing both my parents and brother was horrific, and then to learn that my own parents weren't even my real parents was almost too much for me to take. Alone and sad, I began to look into my real mother's past, and I managed to find out who my real father was. After reaching out, my father was excited to find out that I existed. So now, I am left feeling both sad that I lost the family that I had always known and excited for having discovered one completely new that couldn't wait to get to know me. Thanks for watching. Please like the video so it can be recommended to others.
Hi. I'm Sebastian, and my family is odd. Growing up, my parents were amazing with their finances and made successful investment after investment, even though we were quite wealthy. Our parents never spoiled my brother Luke and I. They always just saved the money that they earned. Of course, we lived quite well. We always ate lots of healthy food and had lots of comfortable clothes. But our parents never really saw buying us the latest toys or games as a good investment. That alone wouldn't have made our parents odd. It was more like the things that they did do with their money. For starters, they had a bunker built behind our house, just in case there was a nuclear war. Again, that wasn't enough to say that they were odd. Oh no, inside our house they had some of the strangest art collections. They had medieval armor on some walls. There were collections of door handles on another, and a large collection of spoons on the wall of the family room. There were lots of other quirky little things, but the biggest was that my parents despised banks and only ever kept their fortune in a safe in the house. No one, other than my parents, my brother and I knew about that safe though, and for the most part, it was forgotten about. As my brother and I grew up, he began to take more of an interest in sports and magic tricks. Two things that normally didn't go together all that well, but that was Luke. He just had very fast hands and excelled at things that required physical strength. Myself though, well, I began to read more and started to become an expert with computers. By the time we left high school, my brother had a scholarship to a university to play football, whereas I had to get a part-time job to help pay for my computer science degree. We both knew that our parents could easily afford to pay for our schooling, but they were far too cheap. Years later, though, I started working for a software engineering firm. The pay was okay, and I got to work on some pretty amazing projects, but I didn't have a lot of money. I rented a small apartment and had to take the bus everywhere I went because I couldn't afford to buy a car. My brother, on the other hand, had become an investment expert like our parents. He had luxury cars, a massive mansion, and he always had the most beautiful women with him. I had been saving up to buy a house, and I was rather desperate since it had taken me years to save up, and I figured that if I asked him in just the right way, that maybe he would help me out. Hey, Luke, listen, I have about $35,000 saved up for a house. Do you, think that maybe you could invest it for me? Please, any little bit that you can do to help is appreciated. You're joking, right? No, not at all. Why would I be joking? Because I didn't make my money the way that Mom and Dad have. Sebastian, of all people, I figured that you would understand that I make my money because I'm a thief. I almost laughed as he told me this, but then he pulled out his phone and showed me photos from his many heists. The pictures did give him credibility, but I couldn't get past that this was all just an elaborate prank. But how and when did this happen? Just kind of did. I met someone shortly after graduating college that taught me how to pick locks and how to steal cars, and the rest is history. Are you trying to tell me that you have become rich because you're a thief? Yeah. Kinda makes you regret your boring life, doesn't it? Luke knew that I would never say anything. After all, growing up, he would always pick on me. He was always the stronger one, and I was always the weaker. Even when we became adults, I could never stand up to him. Weeks passed and my parents wanted to invite us over for dinner. My brother showed up in his fancy car and stunning new girlfriend. And I arrived late because the bus was behind schedule. Regardless, our parents invited us in and made us a massive meal. Oh, Luke,
Your mother and I are so proud of you. You've done so well for yourself. Thanks, guys. It hasn't been easy, but I've done my best.
Maybe we can teach Sebastian how to do things. That way he can enjoy the same life of luxury as you.
Mom, I'm happy with doing what I'm doing after all. It's good, honest work.
We know, Sebastian. We just want the two of you to be happy.
Yeah, besides, there's no way that Sebastian could cut it in my line of work. He was just so smug. If only our parents knew what he actually did for a living, they wouldn't be so proud of him. Not long after that night, though, both of our parents became ill. It came on suddenly, and within a few days, the two of them had passed away. I was shocked as I hadn't been expecting it, but I knew that it would happen one day. At the funeral, Luke was on his best behavior. He did his best to help out with the arrangements, such as picking out flowers and letting people know about our parents' passing. Afterwards, we went to meet with the lawyer to discuss the will. Both of us knew that they had a fair amount of money. While I was grieving their loss, I also knew that it was possible that my parents might have left us both enough money with which to spend the rest of our lives comfortably. So, you both knew what your parents were like. Rather than leave you a bank account, they left you this code for their safe. In it is everything: money, family heirlooms, and the deeds to all of their properties. It's up to the two of you to divide up the assets fairly. I trust that the two of you will do so. We both agreed and took the paper. Hey, I'll meet you there in an hour. I have to head home first. I thought that was a bit odd, but just shrugged and made my way over to my parents' house. It felt so odd to be there without them. As I walked into the office where the safe was, I noticed that it was a mess. There on the floor was the empty safe and a note that read, "Sorry, Sebastian, but I got greedy. It's hard for a thief to not be. Don't worry, unlike you, I'll spend the money on fun things. Hope you have a nice life." All I could see was red. I knew he was a thief, but I had no idea that he would betray me like this. When the police came out, they couldn't find any evidence for where he was. The trail had run cold. I, however, was not ready to give up. While my brother had spent time playing sports and honing his body, I had learned how to use my computer skills to become something of a hacker. I never broke the law, but I did make a game of seeing what organizations that I could break in without being noticed. I started off by tracking down my brother's email and found that he had purchased a flight set to leave the country in a few days, and I sent a copy of his flight information anonymously to the police. I then scoured his email and found that he had made a large deposit into a bank account. One that I was able to use a glitch in the system to put a freeze on the account. I then logged off and trusted that things would work out. A couple of days later, some police came to my apartment and notified me that my brother had been captured. Not only that, but they had managed to recover all the stolen assets from my parents' safe. I was ecstatic, as that meant that I would finally get my share of my inheritance, along with all the family heirlooms and keepsakes as well. However, the police had also discovered that while my brother had indeed stolen the money, that he was also guilty for the deaths of our parents. Purchased a poison a month ago that would very slowly kill someone, and had given it to our parents so that he could get access to their safe. He knew that he would need to flee the country soon and needed the money in their safe to do so. The fact that he had betrayed me and stolen the money was bad enough, but knowing that he had murdered our parents was too much for me. I had felt a bit of guilt spoiling his plans, but upon hearing what he had done, I felt zero sympathy for him. Not long after that, Luke was sentenced to life in prison. I do write to him every so often, but I won't be telling him that I was the reason that he was caught. Although, maybe one day I will. As for me, I was able to start up my own software engineering firm thanks to my parents' fortune. Not only that, but I now have my pick of properties to live out of. I do hate what had to happen for me to be where I am today, but I know that my parents are looking down on me and are grateful that I've put their money to good use. And I know that they are proud of me. Thanks for watching. Please like and share.